everyone, and welcome to What's Happening. I'm Elliot Margolis. I'm here with my co-host, George Binns. And our guest today is running for Congress in the district that we have Seth Moulton right now, the Essex district, the district that you are watching from. This is an opponent for Seth Moulton, John Paul Moran. John, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Elliot. Thank you, George. Thanks for having me.
So tell me, John, why are you running?
Good question. I'm running because I believe our government is here to provide unity, liberty, and opportunity for all people in our district, in our state, and our country. And I didn't think I'd wake up, as a younger person, I thought America was America. I really thought America was an idea that meant you work hard, you can succeed. That America meant we had basic law and order. That America meant we weren't a socialist country because we fought socialists. We had the Cold War. We've been opposed to socialism. And now we have a party that's been co-opted by the radical socialist left that's on the verge of taking over our system of government, which has succeeded more, the most successful nation in the world's history over the past 240 years. Yet the Democrat Party has gone off the rails. And I wrote a book about this in 2016, and I predicted this could happen. And I kind of set the alarm about it. But in principle, I'm running because I'm a lifelong businessman, former MIT scientist. I've done a lot of my life. And I said, I can't imagine the day where we wake up, which could be November 4th, and America isn't America anymore. And it was not my plan. I'd be doing better financially, quite frankly, and professionally if I was not running for Congress. I do not need this job. I'm not doing it for money. I'm not doing it for power and control like many on the left, even maybe some on the right. I'm doing it because we need to bring sanity and common sense to government, which is completely absent as far as I can see right now. So I'm doing it for my country, for my state, for my district, my state, my country, to help the people.
Okay, but how do you differ from Seth Moulton, who you're running against?
Where do I start? I don't know where to start. I mean, on every issue I could think of, with the exception of one issue. There's one issue we agree on, I think. With the exception of every issue I can think of, we are on the opposite side. So I want less government and lower taxes. He wants more big government, more regulations, and higher taxes. I want controlled borders. Common sense. Every country in the world controls its borders. It's what you do when you're a country. It's part of being a country. But the left sees potential voters from illegal immigrants. So he's on the side of open borders to the point where he won't even deport violent gangs like MS-13 that murdered and gutted a poor 17-year-old kid back 2 years ago. After that happened, six MS-13 gang members killed a victim, a young adult in Lynn, in our district. And what does Seth Moulton do? He says no to a bill that would deport gangs like that. I can talk about the environment. I'm a trained scientist. Seth Moulton is not. It's very clear. He's on the side of AOC and Kamala Harris and every other crazy left-winger in Congress that wants to, I guess we're going to get Fred Flintstone mobiles because we're not going to have cars anymore within 10 years. No gas-powered vehicles in 10 years. I mean, the idea is no gas heat or cooking in your house in 10 years. Every house in America needs to be torn down and rebuilt or totally refurbished or totally rebuilt according to the Green New Deal. He's on the side of that. I mean, there's really very few things that we see eye to eye on. And my difference is I want liberty and freedom for people. I believe government is there to serve people. He believes government there is to control people. It's the opposite. And he wants power and control. And he's vain. He's since high school. I've met his high school teachers that said that he wanted to be empowered. He wanted to run for government and to be president someday. That's a good idea for a 15-year-old looking at the stars. But that's not the person you want in government. That's a lifelong ambition to be in control. You want someone that's, I think, like someone like me or our current president that run businesses, are successful, and say we're going to step away from our profession to serve the people for a period and then step back because I believe in term limits. So and so there's many things I can talk about. I believe that you shouldn't be aborting babies up to birth for any reason. Seth Moulton thinks you should abort children all the way up to birth, and with no exceptions. Those are just a few things that I see as differences between us. In addition, I've run businesses my whole life. I understand that Seth Moulton ran a business for a couple of years after he got his fancy Harvard graduate degree, didn't make $1 of revenues, and his company, I understand, stiffed investors at Johns Hopkins University, and that when it folded, it didn't pay his taxes. So, he'll say, I know what it's like to meet payroll. I guess that's on other people's dimes, because I know what it's like to meet payroll for the past 30 years, and it's been on my dime. Many sleepless nights worried about making payroll, and many times I don't take a check because I pay my people first. So I get that. So those are just a few things I could say that differentiate me from Seth Moulton.
George?
Well, this district runs from Lynn all the way up to the New Hampshire border, from Gloucester almost to Lowell. It's a pretty big and pretty diverse area. So when you start to say, I'm going to support the district, we're talking about a lot of extremes. So for all these different kinds of problems, what do you think of the, say, the three biggest problems that need to be fixed in this 6th district that Congress can do something about, and you as our representative can help us fix these problems?
Okay, great question. So there's a lot to fix. And, I would say my priorities are the purpose of government. Way back before there was America, the governments, the trade-off was you had kings, you had czars, and they protected you from invading forces so you could live in safety and made sure you could put food on your table. Very, very basic commitments that government needs to make if it's any government at all. Well, the Democrats have attacked both pillars, attacking our police and our security, our borders, our military, our police, and attacking us economically. And so the first thing I'd say is economically, I've had many meetings with the Gloucester fishermen. I've seen what the regulations, what Democrats have done to basically annihilate much of the Gloucester fishing industry. That's one example. But the same, in parallel, things are happening in Lynn. By the way, we have the highest unemployment in the country here in Mass. And in Lynn, it's 25% unemployment. I'm not sure it's higher anywhere else in the country. So bringing jobs back from communist China and from overseas is a very high priority. Seth Moulton and the Democrats want to allow illegal immigrants here to take jobs, and they're not asking, they're in bed effectively with communist China, defending them over the COVID virus so they can attack Trump. And so I believe in economically, we need to get jobs back into the district, back into Lynn. I'm a businessman. I've been a businessman my whole life, and I will fight to get jobs back into our district with a number of programs. I'm also going to form the first Defense of Small Business Council in the U.S. House of Representatives. I'm committed to that. Almost 50% of the people that work in our district and around the country work for small businesses, and there's very little voice for small business in Congress. So that's a big thing I'm going to do, is protect our small businesses. So many are shut down and suffering because of the extreme overreach over the COVID virus. And I'm going to be supporting small businesses as well. So that's one big thing I'm going to do. Another thing is going to be security. While we might not have had the riots that you saw in Boston and Portland and Seattle, they're coming our way. If the Democrats get their way in the State House, which I can't do much about, that's a state level thing. But on the federal level, Seth Moulton and the Democrats have also pushed to defund our police and strip them from qualified immunity, and that will mean crimes coming our way to our suburbs as well as our cities of Lynn and Salem and other places. So you can't have a functioning society if people are worried about going to bed at night and getting robbed and raped and killed. And so I'm all for supporting our police and enhancing security. Those are two things. I'd say the third thing would be education. We need to have choice in education. If people talk about minority populations in our country not getting a fair shake, I agree with that. But it's not because of conservative values. It's because largely because the left is in bed with the teachers union that's looking out for themselves. They're really Marxist. The way they operate and the way their goals are honestly, quite honestly Marxist, and they do not want people to have choice in education. So kids are stuck in bad schools because they're zip coded. I'm against that. People need to have school choice so people can parents can bring their kids to better schools if their schools are failing. Those are three big things I think we need to look at.
Well, you mentioned one of my subjects I'm quite interested in. When I started working for GE, 50 years ago now and change, uh,
Wow.
there were 13,000 people employed by GE and Lynn, and between the River Works and West Lynn. Last time I got a count, it was down around 3,000. So a lot of high-paying jobs got moved out for lots of reasons. And yet, as you mentioned, there's a 25% unemployment rate in the area. And I know that they've talked about having a training program to get people ready to do these jobs that they can't hire people for because they don't have the qualifications. So this is something that's on the way. But one of the problems that keeps driving this is this whole Essex County is a very high rent district, which means you've got to be making some pretty good money to be able to live here.
Yes.
Which means you've got to have good quality jobs. And that's the real nut that I see. How do you get good quality jobs into this area?
Well, I don't want to oversimplify it, but to oversimplify it, to simplify it a bit, there's a few things that drive businesses out of a district and of a state. It's taxes, number one. Taxes and regulations are what drive businesses out. You see in New York, in New Jersey, Massachusetts, California, these left-wing zealots get in control, and they charge higher and higher taxes. They demonize hard work and entrepreneurs, and they want and they over-regulate everything. I mean, of course, there's some regulations we need. Obviously, clearly, there's regulations that businesses need. But if you look at the amount of regulations just on the federal level, it's the dollars associated with it are bigger than, I believe, it'd be the sixth largest economy in the world, just our regulatory state in our country. So, we need to look at that. And Seth Moulton and the Democrats, you won't find a Democrat anywhere, especially radical like Seth Moulton, that wants to do anything to reduce regulations or reduce taxes. They want to go the opposite direction. That drives businesses out. As a businessman, I can tell you, nobody wants to be paying all their money to taxes and be regulated to death. That's number one. And number two is we need to find ways to bring and entice businesses back to our district. And we have communist China there. We just went through a pandemic. We were worried about, do we have enough resources domestically for the materials we need, the masks, the drugs? So much is being made in communist China, and they caused the darn virus. Yet Seth Moulton and the radical left is basically, they're at their behest. They're defending them, and it seems scary, but it makes sense because they're all authoritarians. I think Democrats, quietly, frankly, are jealous of how much control the communists have over their people. And from the pandemic, you can see the parallel between the way the Democrats have run things and Republicans have. So to get back to your question, we need to reduce regulation and taxes on business, and we need to find ways to get them back into our district. I'm going to fight like heck to do that. As a businessman, that's how I think, and I believe we need to do that. Seth Moulton is missing in action when it comes to that. When it comes to jobs in his district, as you can see by the high unemployment, and he's never here. He's around the country trying to get other Democrats elected. He doesn't even show up at his own office.
Well, that brings up another point, as you just mentioned. The problem we've had with this COVID-19 and pandemic is a short supply of a lot of necessary equipment.
Correct.
Facilities. Harvard, Cambridge Square is noted for its biotech. We've got two good biotech companies that I know of in the district, Cell Signaling out on 128 and New England Biolabs. They've now moved up into, I think it's, I forget where they moved, to be honest with you.
Sure. I know.
But there's a couple of them around. And this seems to be an area where locally there is a seed of a business growing, the biotech industry, to replace things like the shoe that we can't make shoe machinery again. We can't make shoe machinery in this country anymore. There's no market for it. But biotech is a big area. So the question comes up, you talked about education. How do we get the education system focused on something like biotech? Because there's an opportunity for a lot of students growing up around here.
Yes, yes. Well, that's another big thing. So I have ideas around that. I've got, well, two ideas. So one, I've come up with an idea of the opportunity, United States Opportunity Corps, which will be, in a way, 60 years ago. It'll be when I get in Congress. It'll be almost exactly 60 years later. John F. Kennedy created the U.S. Peace Corps, and I have an idea to create the U.S. Opportunity Corps, which would be a 2-year program, ideally after high school, to give young adults the ability to go and get apprenticeships, very similar to what they do in Germany, and to kind of have a program set up that would be a private-public partnership to help kids out of high school and get on the right track with their education without going right into an expensive 4-year, $250,000 college and often getting degrees that are useless and are not economically viable. So this program would require that any education tracks either in the trades or pre-college would be consisted of a certain amount of training, education, and apprenticeships, and would need to be economically viable. As a trained scientist at MIT prior to running my marketing company, I'm a big fan of the STEM studies, and we're getting killed on that. I mean, what these degrees these kids are getting graduating with are so often so useless. They end up working at Starbucks with these massive college bills they'll be paying for decades, and we're not encouraging to get these degrees. So I'm all for biotech, high technology, engineering. Those are studies that we are really lacking in America, and we need to find ways to encourage that with loan programs, high school education, and other programs to encourage those studies. Instead of these Marxist, you look at these kids going out of college and burning down cities as part of their Antifa movement, hating their country, and mostly probably because they're mad that they spent $250,000 on a degree that's useless. So I agree 100%. We need to do that.
Another interesting. Let me finish one more point, if you, Elliot.
Sure.
You're talking about STEM degrees. I'm all in favor. I got 3 myself, so I know what you mean.
Oh, great.
But the issue, I think, is schools are being financed to take in students no matter what, because the school gets paid because they get the loan money, and the student
Right.
gets stuck with trying to satisfy the loan requirements. Probably against your regulatory feelings, but would you think it'd be worthwhile to put a requirement in there? You can get a loan to go to school if it's a STEM degree, and if it's art history or something of the equivalent, you're on your own dime.
I agree 100%. I think there needs to be a rating system for degrees that are economically viable and needed for the society, like STEM degrees, and they get funding. And if there are degrees that don't fit that qualification, I'm all for freedom. If people want to go and get their degree and get their degrees in other fields because they want to pursue their passions, they have every right to do that, but not on the government's dime at all. And in addition to that, I believe that when you go and buy, I'm in real estate as well. When you buy a house, there's so many disclosures. There's mountains of paperwork to buy a house or to buy a car because all these disclosures have to happen. You go to college, there's no requirement for the college to tell you what money you can earn from this degree and what the historical record is when you get this degree from this college, how much money you can earn, right? So there needs to be tracked 1 year out, 3 years out, 5 years out, 10 years out. How are people tracking from that university with that degree? And what's the current need for that profession right now, right? That would solve a lot of the problems because the loan money should be directly related to how well that degree performs, like anything else you loan money for. And if we did that, you know what? All these Marxists in these colleges pushing all this social stuff that has nothing to do with economics, they'd dry up because they wouldn't get the funding for it anymore. That would fix that problem in a heartbeat.
In dealing with education, I know you quickly mentioned trade schools.
Yes.
We seem to have this philosophy in this country that somebody in a trade, a plumber, an electrician, an auto mechanic, they don't deserve the same kind of credit as people who go to college. And we don't have, like when I was in high school here in Beverly, we had a trade school in Beverly. Now, if you want to go to trade school, you got to go to out of town. And not everybody who wants to get into the trade school can get in now whereas before, if you wanted to, you could. That's item number one. Item number two is, it seems to me that before Jimmy Carter was president, I don't know if you're old enough to remember Jimmy Carter, but Jimmy Carter created the Department of Education. Ever since the Department of Education has been created, the quality of education in the United States has gone down.
Correct.
And I'd like you to comment about those two things.
All right. So in reverse order, the Department of Education, I think it had good intentions. I'm not thinking it was done with ill intentions, but whenever the federal government comes in and does what it does on the federal level like that, they make things worse as a rule. We've got to make it more local. The same thing you can look at LBJ, when he said we're going to have black Americans, he used a very derogatory word at the time, black Americans voting for us voting Democrat for the next 200 years once we get them hooked on government welfare programs. And that's exactly what happened. And if anybody wants to be angry about the racial divisions in our country, they could blame exclusively the radical Democrat Party for pushing that program, which took the father out of the home and put people on decades of welfare. Thank you, radical Democrats. The same thing's happening with education. There's no reason for an education department, especially when you look at their track record. There's other ways we need to do it. And going back to the trade schools, I believe the U.S. Opportunity Corps would be a much better use of federal investment and focus than the U.S. Department of Education. Let the schools and the towns, the counties, and the schools focus on their own locally for education, with obviously some basic standards like SAT standards and things. And the Opportunity Corps would be, you could take a college track, which would be a partnership with community colleges, but it would also be, there'd be civics lessons about America, which you're not getting in the schools today. And then the apprenticeship track would be modeled very, very, very closely with Germany and how they work. They have public-private partnerships. I think there's 400,000 companies involved in that in Germany, and they're killing us when it comes to apprenticeships in the trades. And it's another fallacy that you have to go to college to be successful. All these kids go to college, spend all this money, get degrees they don't use. It's a ripoff. It's really just a ripoff, because once that you want to be an engineer or a lawyer, yes, you have to go to college. If you want to be a salesman, you don't need a college degree for that. You should go into the Opportunity Corps for a couple of years and get your apprenticeship and learn how to sell. There's no reason to spend all that money to go to college. You just need to be able to be proficient in English and use PowerPoint and Word and be able to put sales materials together. But there's no reason to go and spend all that money. And then on top of that, I believe somewhere around 96, 97% of college professors now are either on the far left or left-leaning. Conservatives are almost vanished. There's no political diversity in universities. That'd be another thing I would insist upon. No funding to university unless there's equal representation with political diversity, not just all left-wingers that are training your kids to be Marxists. But I think that would be I'm getting lots of high marks from my idea for the U.S. Opportunity Corps as an alternative. You want to go to the military, or serve your country as part of the being part of the Opportunity Corps, which would have a civic element to it, but also have education, training, and apprenticeships with companies. And the cost burden would be primarily with our partnerships with these companies, so it wouldn't be another big fat government program. Financially, it wouldn't be. Do you guys like that idea? I think people seem to like that idea. Hey, the Peace Corps, JPM, is going to create the domestic U.S. Opportunity Corps.
I've always thought that what we ought to have is, instead of going to college after you graduate high school, have 2 years of in-service to America. Because what we have, in my view, in this country, we have people that kids in particular, they don't appreciate this country. They don't appreciate what they have. And they need, whether it's the Peace Corps, Vista, something like that, where you have to spend 2 years to help other people, and then you realize how lucky you really are.
Well, I agree with you, and actually I didn't get too much into it, but when I mentioned the civics part of it, that would be an integral part of it. So rather than keeping it separate, I'm looking at doing the track where you prep for college, or you get into apprenticeships and do your apprenticeships and internships. At the same time, part of the requirement would be just that. would be that you'd also be serving your country in the civic level. A third track would be just social work, whether you want to help people, tutoring kids, helping the elderly, or helping the environment, right? Doing things that are civic minded that help your country. So it'd be a way to help your country without, if you don't want to go to the military, you help your country by joining the Opportunity Corps. So it'd be kind of it would help your career track. At the same time, you'd be helping your country for 2 years. And then there'd be additional incentives for additional scholarship money, not unlike you get from the military. A little bit different than that, but that would be the idea. So I think if we did that, it'd be a very pro-America program. And it would have all those elements that no one's getting. There's no track like that. And, unless you want to go to the Peace Corps, which is, quite a bit different, you go overseas. But this is to help our own country. God knows we need it here.
That's for sure.
God knows we need it here. So
George,
that's what I'm
time for one more question.
Yes, please.
George.
Oh, okay. I missed the first part of your introduction. Sorry. But basically what you're talking about is the idea of expanding the military draft system to include other things besides carrying a gun, which sounds good. But the usual argument against that comes down to one of, what are you going to do with all of these people? And one of the arguments against a standing army with a draft system is, oh, we got all these soldiers hanging around. Well, why don't we go to war? Or why don't we go straighten out somebody that's acting up? It requires some kind of discipline in the part of the government, which is probably an oxymoron, to
Yes.
somehow or other say, look, just because we have this capability to beat up on anybody that we want to, we don't necessarily have to do it. And I think it comes down to the old phrase of making the world safe for democracy. Things got carried away. How do you constrain the government to keep out of that militaristic approach?
Well, yeah. So just to be clear, I'm not saying that. Ideally, I wouldn't mind the idea that everyone's compelled to give 2 years of service, either through the Opportunity Corps, something like the Peace Corps, or the military. My idea more about the Opportunity Corps would be an optional track. I'm not sure I would say that it's mandatory, but I want to make it so attractive that millions of kids do it, because it'd be such a great thing to do. So if your question is more about, a draft system, I mean, we don't have the draft now. I mean, we have the draft, but we're not utilizing it, although we may need to start using it if we can't fill the ranks of the military. But for sure, we need, I think my idea of the Opportunity Corps, if you're worried about the military getting, out of control with a large standing army, this would help that in a sense, because maybe some kids that would otherwise join the military are going to join the Opportunity Corps. So many of them go to the military because they gives them structure, and then they get their college paid for and everything else. This would be a kind of a more civil service option for young adults to choose, versus going into the Peace Corps or another program or the military. I don't want it to take away from the military service, but at the same time, this would really be a career focused track at the same time being civics focused. Did I answer your question okay? Because I'm not sure I did.
Well, you're getting to the point that I'm struggling with listening to. If you start these programs, the implication is you're volunteering to do something at a lower wage.
Sure.
The competition comes in with the unions. There aren't that many anymore, but
Sure.
people are doing a similar job and getting paid for it to support their family.
Yep.
And you're bringing in this crowd of recent high school graduates, we'll call them that, to take over and do some of their work. This kind of a program starts to get to be a little complicated, and how you balance people who are doing this for a living as opposed to the students who are now doing this to learn a trade, if you will.
I mean, I think maximizing it at 2 years with young people. I mean, I think it should right out of high school. Maybe you can go up to age 30 under certain situations if someone kind of missed the boat on getting in earlier. I really don't know if there's a conflict there, because it's really just a way to get young apprentices, especially in programs that they're I understand that electricians and plumbers are going to be really hard to get. Right now, they're hard to get. If you go a plumber, you wait a week. It's harder and harder to get people to find these people because there's a shortage, and they're talking about being massive shortage of these people in the future. So I think those trades really need people. So I think that they're going to be welcoming this. And then the other idea is it's kind of, they're getting less money, but they're doing better, because if they go to a 4-year college and have these massive student loans with degrees they don't even want to use, they're in big trouble financially. So I see this as more of a cost savings for these students than the money. Yeah, maybe they're doing apprenticeships and doing it for cheap, but it's really just to get them. You look at the system in Germany. I don't think as far as I know, I don't know if there's a problem with that, because they're really out after 2 years. So we don't see it taking jobs away. It's more of really an apprenticeship program. And the civic stuff is, I mean, God knows we need so much help in our cities for the youth, for tutoring. There's so many things that we can do on the civic level, serving their country domestically. I think that would really, I mean, I'm not sure we'd be seeing these riots we're seeing right now if we had a program like this, because kids would go into these programs and they wouldn't be spending their time rioting, and they'd have something better to work for.
Yeah. John, we're almost out of time, but I want to give you a minute to just say to the people, you're John Paul Moran and you're running for Congress. Vote for me. Go ahead.
Okay. So I'm John Paul Moran for Congress, lifelong business owner, former MIT scientist. And and by the way, this district is very winnable. It's a D+6, which means Democrat voter registration advantage is a small number. It's the most competitive, most winnable in the state. And this is the last place that had a Republican go to Congress a quarter century ago. So to me and to my followers and to many people I talk to, including many Democrats, this is a must-win seat for my race. So John Paul Moran for Congress. You can find me at johnpaulmoran.com. We need volunteers. We need donors. We need support. So please come and help if you can. And we really appreciate your support. We have less than 3 months to victory, and we're really counting on everybody.
Okay, John, thank you very much for spending the half hour with us. We appreciate it. And it was certainly educational. I hope for the people that are watching, it's going to be educational. And maybe
one more question, Elliot. Are you running for the Republican nomination in a primary, or are you automatically on the ballot in November?
I am the Republican candidate for the 6th district. I have no primary. We'd love people to go out to vote, to show that, we want everybody to vote September 1st anyway, because there's other people that people need to vote for on the ballot. So please come out no matter what on the September 1st to vote. I am the only Republican running. So my race is November 3rd. So against Democrat Seth Moulton, of course.
Okay, again, thank you very much. Good luck. We'll see you on the campaign trail.
Great.
Appreciate you being on. Maybe
Elliot,
another primary we'll have you again.
Thank you so much. Hopefully we'll be on again. And again, thank you, everybody. And go USA.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Okay. Goodbye.
Bye.